Mic lock button is on. Double tap.
Hello, my name is Bean from Bean's World, and today I'm going to talk about the how to get imaginary companions for those who want them. So, first of all, what is an imaginary companion? An imaginary companion can be an invisible friend, which is made up by mostly children or people with learning disabilities and learning difficulties, or people with autism. Imaginary companions can also be known as entities. There is a spiritual side to having an imaginary friend, and there's also a creative side. So, first of all, and also imaginary friends can be in inanimate objects such as dolls, teddy bears, anything, and like there was a kid who had a tube of tomato paste or tomato puree, and he was carrying it around. I think there is just endless things to what you give life to. Life that you put in something, and there are quite a few reasons why you should have an imaginary friend. One is if you want to be more creative, then an imaginary friend should support you in the creative flow. Number two, it will open other possibilities, to what that world is. And there are loads and loads of those possibilities. And finally, an imaginary friend can just support you in day-to-day life. And it can be your subconscious being projected. We see this in the Narnia books, in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe especially. And we also see it in Star Wars when Yoda is helping Luke. So we see these kinds of things in other kinds of literature and films. So now I'm going to move on to how do you get an imaginary friend. If you're an adult and you've never had an imaginary companion before, well, the easiest thing to do is, first of all, the questions you want to ask is, do you want it to be invisible? Or do you want it to be from a television series? Or do you want it to be from a book you've read? Or do you just want it to be something from, history? Do you want it to be an emperor or anything? It could be anything from anywhere. The sky is the limit. And that's kind of literally where to go from there. If you are really, really stuck, an inanimate object is the best way to go about things. Having a teddy bear that you talk to. And this is good for our mental health as well. To share our problems with a teddy bear. We know that some of these things, all imaginary companions can't argue back unless they're of a spiritual nature, but there are videos on my other channel about that. So I think the things that you need to take into consideration is, where do these imaginary companions, how do you put them into life? How do you, well, first of all, the best thing to do is start with an inanimate object, but if it is invisible, if you can see it and no one else can, that is a great thing. Because then you've stepped into a world that most of us have stepped into. You know? And that's kind of where things happen, I guess. And I got an imaginary friend, my first imaginary friend I met in the garden. His name was Gress. I could never remember what he looked like, but I do remember I had a fascination with people with beards and watches. And he had a cool car, and we met every Saturday in the garden. But the reason I had imaginary friends was because nobody, like, when I got to the age of when I understood friendship, I think kind of nobody really wanted to spend time with me. I mean, who would want to spend time with somebody who's visually impaired and also got other problems which are developing? I never really knew or understood how my Asperger's started. I never knew where it went. But I think just the world was very, very complex for me as a kid. When I got to about 8 or 9, for me, the world was still evolving for me. And I was literally, I remember I never enjoyed adult shows. Never. Unless they were documentaries or films that I could follow, I really never enjoyed anything. I enjoyed a few films, but I was never really sit down and watch a 3-hour film. That was never me. I always wandered off and did something else, did something more constructive, because I felt like sitting down and watching a film was, why, and I was a noisy kid and everything like that. And imaginary friends became a problem for me, which I'll do another video about, but this is a guide, and my imagination has just kept on going. When I was 23, it was like being in the Matrix. It was like the red pill, blue pill moment. Sorry, the blue pill, red pill moment, and I just took the red pill and stayed in that world. And it's just, even if I didn't take the blue pill, there would have been a chance when that world would have opened back up for me anytime that I wanted. Because people just say, oh, I've forgotten my imagination. You never really forget it. You just, that part of your mind, it's just like a garden. It's like an overgrown garden. But if you cut the weeds back, it all comes flowing back. You never really lose your childhood. Never. It's not really something that you lose. There are things that you may forget, but there are things that definitely stick with you. And the last thing that I'm just going to wrap this up with is, should you see a psychiatrist if your imaginary friends do not stop past a certain age? And my answer is no. Only if that person wants them to stop. Because if those imaginary friends are helping them grow and evolve, and, you know, because you're putting up barriers for your children. I felt like people were putting barriers up for me because I had to suppress and mask and all the rest of it, which I do from time to time now, but anyway, I just thought I'd do this video because my imagination is still growing. It's been allowed to evolve, and now I have my own world where my imaginary friends live on and off the internet, and it's important.
One notification. Bigger live. Now. Hey. Mind knob. How's your mic trigger? Mic lock. Finish recording.